moving a little bit away from fantasy specifically, we want to try to be half fantasy, half football on this. So when we're in the season, we do a lot of segments that are like, games to watch this week, looking at different odds and Vegas odds on different prop bets, things like that. One we want to talk about here is looking at NFL MVP predictions. I know it's way too early. There's going to be a hard reset probably on all of these takes after the draft, but I want to throw out some interesting names here. Maybe we have a few dark horses. Alex, I'll put the ball in your court first. Who do you have if you had to predict right now the 2020-2021 NFL MVP?
Yeah, I might get made fun of for this one because it's pretty chalk, but if I was a betting man, why would I not take Patrick Mahomes, right? Like, there's not much of an argument needed. He's been a starter for 2 seasons, and he already has an NFL MVP, a Super Bowl championship, and a Super Bowl MVP under his belt. Kansas City has everyone back. They're going to be one of the top teams in the league from 2019 to 2020 as far as their roster being almost the same. Like, they have not had any turnover on their coaching staff that I can think of. Their roster is locked in. Tyreek's back, Kelsey, Sammy Watkins. They even were able to pull back DeMarcus Robinson, Damian Williams in the backfield, and maybe they even draft a running back.
Eric Bieniemy too,
as well.
offensive coordinator. That's a big deal.
Yeah, so for me, Patrick Mahomes has got to be the front runner. Last season, over 4,000 yards and 26 touchdowns, and he missed 2.5 games. So Lamar is certainly going to be a contender, and I think there will be dark horses as well. But if I was picking, it's Mahomes. What about you?
Yeah, I'm taking the other chalk pick here. The last back-to-back MVP winner was Peyton Manning in 2008, 2009, and then before that, with Brett Favre winning it 3 times in 1995, 1996, and 1997. We were probably 1 or 2 years old during that time, but that was the last time we saw a back-to-back MVP. But I'm willing to put bet on it that Lamar Jackson, I believe he's the front runner, or I'm sorry, second behind your Mahomes. Mahomes is plus 600 as of right now per Vegas, and Lamar is plus 750 there at second. So we're taking the 1 and 2 here. It's hard to disagree with these, some of these metrics, and look at what Lamar Jackson did last season in some pretty interesting game scripts. He ran for 1,200 yards in only 15 games. He had 7 touchdowns also on the ground. He sat out several fourth quarters just due to the blowouts that they were giving these teams, putting RG3 in the game because they were up by so much. So you think if maybe we see that, some of the narratives that I'm seeing like on Twitter of people saying, the Ravens are going to get figured out. This happens every couple of years where a Russian QB comes in, they get figured out, and then they disappear. I don't think that's going to happen here with Lamar Jackson. One, because we've never seen anyone at his level in the league before, but also just the way that the Ravens are building this team, building this offense, and building this scheme. I think they have much more up their sleeve that they didn't even show in 2019. Even if that is the case, right? If all the Baltimore, haters are correct, that still, I think, leaves more production to be had for Lamar Jackson. He won't be sitting out those fourth quarters, and he could easily beat his own rushing record in 2020. He led the NFL.
He could easily win the rushing title, man. What are the odds?
That would be insane. He led the NFL in yards per carry at 6.9, so you think he'd give him some more attempts there in the fourth quarter? Why not? I think he could easily beat his own record here again. He passed for 36 touchdowns in 2019, and again, in only 15 games. That's a fantastic number. I do expect that to potentially come down a little bit, but still, nonetheless, he'll be fantastic. And if the Ravens are, going on a tear where they're, 8-0 to start the season, I don't see why Lamar isn't clearly a front runner at MVP. And then on top of that, I'm hoping here in the next week or two that we see the Ravens add some more weapons for Lamar. Bring in another strong wide receiver. We're going to have Hollywood Brown continuing to develop and hopefully staying healthy in 2019. So I'm taking Lamar Jackson there. Unless something crazy happens, I don't see any way that he's not at least in the top 3 in MVP.
I don't really have anything to add there, but Steph, it's not very double move sports-like to give out the most vanilla takes possible with Mahomes and Lamar Jackson for MVP. So I want to get into some dark horses. I want you to give me.
Wait, before you do, I want to just kind of break down kind of the tiers that we have from MVP. Just give us a quick lay of the land before we throw our dark horses out there, because I'm with you 100% on that. But the way here's how I have it broken down. I just kind of put these together on a whim before we started recording here. I have Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Russell Wilson. I think those are the chalk top 3. We looked at what they did last year, and the Vegas odds reflect that as well. Russell Wilson is plus 900. So After that, I kind of go down one more tier in terms of quarterback. We know quarterbacks are going to win MVP. That's just the way things are going these days. I have Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, and Carson Wentz kind of in that next tier of kind of the younger guys, up-and-coming guys that have a lot of hype around them, that if their teams are doing well are going to win MVP. And then we kind of have these, the old guard, right? The veterans that have been in the league. If it happens just to be their year, if things fall their way time and time again, I could easily see names like Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, all taking MVP away as well. So I kind of have those three tiers of quarterbacks there. But let's get into our dark horses here. I'm really excited to hear what you have, Alex. Go ahead.
Yeah, luckily, both of the guys I'm going to throw out here weren't even in your tier list, so that means they are as spicy as I thought they were. One, I feel like, is definitely more of a long shot than the other, but I'll start with the one that's a little bit safer for the podcast, at least, and that's Kyler Murray. He, the last two seasons, we've seen the MVP be a guy in his second year in the NFL really take a step up and really elevate everything around him in a high-flying offense. So we saw Patrick Mahomes do it with the Chiefs. We saw Lamar Jackson do it with the Ravens. Both of those guys also are fairly mobile quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson obviously way more mobile than Patrick Mahomes. But Kyler Murray fits that mold for me. He won the Heisman in college at Oklahoma. And last season, he finishes with 3,700 yards and 20 passing touchdowns as a rookie. On top of that, he had 544 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. He ran for more yards than every other quarterback in the league other than Lamar Jackson. So you take what he did last season and take that offense with Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, and they brought in Kenyon Drake, and now they bring in DeAndre Hopkins. I can't help but believe this is going to be a top 5 offense next season. In 2019, they were only the 17th ranked scoring offense. They did have some trouble on the offensive line. If they can figure out some ways to plug some holes on their offensive line, maybe they address it in the draft. I really think this offense could be top notch, and I think Kyler Murray is going to be the leader there. And if the Cardinals end up making the playoffs next season and Murray goes for 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns through the air, and he's able to add to that on the ground, I think he's going to be right there in the conversation for MVP. So, fantasy-wise, I obviously think his ADP is continuing to creep up, so I don't know that I'll have him from a fantasy perspective, but I'm really excited to watch him next year. Last year he threw about 550 times. He was at 542 in attempts. So I really think that number is going to go up to 600, 620 next season. He's got a year under his belt. He's got more weapons. I think they're going to have longer and better drives. So keep an eye on Kyler Murray. He's a guy that could be the next second-year quarterback to win MVP for the third season in a row.
Yeah, we talked about, guys, go check out our previous episode, our fantasy debates. One of them we were debating Kyler Murray up against Dak Prescott. I thought there were a lot of good tidbits there and takeaways just looking at their 2019 seasons when comparing those two. So definitely go check that out if you haven't yet. But Alex, I agree. Kyler, and again, the Vegas odds have him fourth, right? So right behind Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, and then there's Kyler right there. So I'm with you, and that attempts number is crazy. That 600 attempts is like what Jameis Winston had last year, and I think that's completely realistic in the range of outcomes. But I'll throw out another dark horse quarterback out there. I didn't name him when we talked about the veteran QBs in my tiers, but the one I have is Matthew Stafford. I know that's going to be gross for a lot of people. They're immediately, hey, what in the world are you talking about? He's an older guy coming off.
He's on the Lions, man.
I know, on a horrible, honestly, there's like offense and defense. Like they haven't had a running game, it seems like, in the last 2 decades. But I like Matthew Stafford a lot. If we look at the last 8 games that he was able to play in 2019 before he got hurt, and I'm starting to see narratives that like Matthew Stafford's injury prone or something. That's the first time he's ever missed, I think, more than like 2 games in a season was last year. I think before that, the last time he even missed a game was like 2016. So I'm not in on the injury prone thing. But if you look at what Stafford was doing, he was playing at MVP level at the end of last season where he played 8 games. So listen to his average stat line: 312 yards, 2.4 touchdowns, 64% completion rate. Those are all elite. Before he went down in fantasy, he was the QB6, if that tells you anything stat-wise for him. And he had some crazy games. On the road against the Raiders, he put up 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. At home against the Vikings, he had 360 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, we think of, right, an MVP usually is on a team that's winning a lot of games. And Yeah, I don't know how in I am on the Lions taking a huge step, but they could be one of those turnaround teams. They're offloading some of those big contracts with Darius Slay and a few other names. I think they're going to make big moves in this draft. They have high draft picks. Could they be maybe like a San Francisco or a Tennessee last year where we see that turnaround? They were 3-4-1 before Stafford went down, and that was with a 4-point loss to Kansas City at home. I feel like they should have won that game. So almost beat the Chiefs, and a 1-point loss to Green Bay, who at the time were major Super Bowl contenders. So they were competing last year, and then kind of just the wheels fell off. Yeah, I think if we see Stafford play at that level for a full season, they're going to win more games. Their situation just in general, I think, is going to be a bit better. And I think he could be in the MVP running, at least in that like top 5 as we reach the end of the season. That's, I think, a pretty hot take, though. Hopefully my case was decent enough. Alex, what are your thoughts?
I actually don't mind it. Looking at the numbers last season, Stafford was on pace for about 5,000 yards and 38 passing touchdowns. The 38 touchdowns would have led the NFL. If they would have ended up being good enough to pull out a wild card spot, he would have been right in that conversation. He's got elite weapons. Kenny Golladay is breaking out in front of us. And then Marvin Jones. Everyone stays sleeping on Marvin Jones all the time.
Yes.
And people act like he can't. People act like he's just like an average wide receiver too, nothing special. But this dude has put up numbers time and time again. Last season, he had that 4-touchdown game. He actually had more points per game last season in fantasy than Jarvis Landry, Stephon Diggs, Odell Beckham, Cortland Sutton, A.J. Brown.
Talk that
and
shit.
People act like Marvin Jones sucks. People act like Marvin Jones sucks, and he's pretty good. There was honestly a lot of games last season where he was the featured option ahead of Kenny Golladay. So it's honestly more of a 1A, 1B situation in Detroit, regardless of whether people want to admit it or not. And Marvin Jones can play. So you have Stafford with 2 tall, athletic receivers on the outside. I believe Danny Amendola is back. TJ Hawkinson could be a good tight end. We don't really know yet. Kerryon Johnson hopefully will be able to stay healthy. But I don't mind it. I think it could be a really good offense. We started to see it last year. They were competitive in the first half of the season. So we'll see what they do in the draft and if they can pick up any pieces to help out Stafford and this team overall. But it's a hot take. I think that's way hotter than my Kyler Murray take. But it's definitely plausible. It's definitely a plausible take there.
Yeah, he's plus 5,000 odds per Vegas to take it all. That's still, and he's like the top 20. So we'll see. Maybe maybe throw a couple few dollars on him.
Put a few dollars here, a few dollars there. Well, if you really want to make some money, you'll take my next sleeper MVP pick, which is Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. I just had to one-up you with the hot takes, and I could get roasted on this, several months from now when Daniel Jones, when the Giants re-sign Eli Manning from retirement and Daniel Jones is on the bench. But I really think Daniel Jones is going to be the real deal. I didn't think so at this time last year. I thought it was ridiculous that the Giants drafted him where they did. I turned out to be wrong. I'm admitting it now, and I think Daniel Jones has a ton of potential. We talked about him earlier and how much he loves to throw the ball down the field. As a rookie, man, he showed some insane promise. In just 12 games, he had 3,000 yards and 24 touchdowns. That's on pace for 4,000 yards and 32 touchdowns in 16 games, and that would have been as a rookie. As well, we talked about, with Kyler Murray and the previous MVPs and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, those guys all have rushing ability. Well, Daniel Jones, believe it or not, has got some wheels. He had 279 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground last season. He averaged more rushing yards per game than Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson.
Damn.
Which I had to fact check myself several times on that because I thought it was wrong. I really did. I thought my math was off, but it's true. Believe it or not, it's true. He did lead the NFL in fumbles last season. I think he cuts back on that heading into year 2. But with the MVP, what you really got to look for is the high upside, right? And as a rookie, Daniel Jones had 4 games that I'm going to read you the stat lines for these 4 games where he just took the top off. And that was a third of the games he played. So instead of 4 games just blowing up, maybe if it's 8 games next season, 8 of the 16 games, if he goes off and then the rest of the year he's just solid, he could be in the conversation. So week 3 in his first NFL start, he had 336 passing yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, and 2 rush touchdowns.
At Tampa Bay in the rain. I'll never forget it.
Yep. Danny Dimes, that's where he was born. No interceptions in that game either. Fast forward to week 8. 322 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Week 10, 308 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Week 16, 352 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. So literally a third of this guy's games last season, he was playing at MVP level as a rookie. The offense should be improved. There's a lot of optimism there with new head coach Joe Judge. And you look at the weapons. We talked about Slayton earlier on today's pod, and Slayton is going to be back, and he's emerging in year 2. Sterling Shepard hopefully will be able to stay healthy from some of those concussion issues. Golden Tate is going to be there. Evan Ingram should be healthy. Saquon Barkley is healthy. So you look at the weapons group that Daniel Jones has, and he has it all. He's got 3 good receivers that all do different things. He's got an elite athletic tight end and arguably the best running back in the league. With Saquon Barkley. So he's got everything he needs around him.
It's true.
It would be nice to see them pick up an offensive lineman in the first round of the draft to really help protect Daniel Jones. But it might sound crazy to say Daniel Jones is going to win MVP next season, but I certainly am going to put some money on it and try to win big.
I like that. I like that a lot. And, the Giants they have high draft capital just like the Lions do. So, maybe they're 1 or 2 big picks away, maybe some blockbuster picks that really pan out that could turn that team around. We'll see what their defense can do. That's, for me, is like the biggest point of contention. But I'll give my last MVP dark horse here. If I look at where Vegas has him, and he's right around Matthew Stafford, plus 5,000. So pretty deep here. The most recent non-quarterback to win the MVP award was LaDainian Tomlinson back in 2006. I was floored back in 2017 when Todd Gurley didn't win it for the Rams. But if I had to throw a running back out there to be MVP next year, for me, it's Derrick Henry. I don't know if there's a skill position player in the NFL that is more heavily relied upon than Henry in this Titans offense. Look at his average stat line. 20 carries, 103 yards, and 1 touchdown. 1 touchdown a game. That's his average. Like, he technically averaged over 1 touchdown per game. It's like 1.07. So you're technically averaging over 1 touchdown per game. That's 16 touchdowns on the ground. Just talking of rushing touchdowns, that's first in the NFL in 2019. It would have been second in 2018, first in 2017, second in 2016, behind the man, the myth, the legend, LeGarrette Blount, putting up 18 touchdowns back in 2016.
Wow.
When I saw that,
hurts.
that brought up some old emotions I hadn't felt in a while.
Oh my gosh, that hurts, man. 18 touchdowns for LeGarrette Blount. What did he have, 50 carries for 40 yards and 18 touchdowns? That's ridiculous.
It was something silly. It was something.
Dang. It's been a crazy decade, man. I'll tell you what. Nothing is safe anymore.
Nothing is. And
golly.
Talking about things that aren't safe, Derrick Henry had 303 rushing attempts in 2019. That's number 1.
It's not safe when he's coming at you. That's for sure.
He's a Mack truck. But, I expect that usage to remain constant for Henry. And he was still efficient with that insane volume, which is what blows my mind. 5.1 yards per attempt is 4th in the NFL. This guy is a machine. He's a genetic freak. He was the rushing yards champ in 2020. If all remains constant, I don't see why he can't do that again. Tennessee's bringing everybody back. They signed their guy Tannehill. They re-signed Henry. So, and I really do think that the Titans are going to be a fun one to watch. I'm kind of liking this resurgence that they're having and the kind of play style that they have. It's like a fun version of the ground and pound, kind of like a modernized version, kind of what we think of like the Bills over the last 5 years here. So I really like what Tennessee's doing.
I've got a very important question for you, Steph.
Let's do it.
Would you rather have to try to tackle Derrick Henry or be the ball carrier and try to get past Aaron Donald?
Wow. I think I would. I would probably just.
Bones are gonna be broken either way. So.
I'm just gonna try to stay away from Derrick Henry. He scares me a little bit. I'll take Aaron Donald. He seems like a nicer guy.
I imagine Derrick Henry as me just. I would try to go low, I guess. I would just dive at the feet, but at the same time, I also imagine myself standing still, and him just lowering his head right into my chest, and
Well, you see,
it's just not a good scene. I don't know. It's tough. I feel like if I went low, I would at least getting hurdled isn't the worst thing in the world. Where with Aaron Donald, I'm really, really getting crushed into the ground. There's going to be turf pellets in my teeth for years to come. So I don't know. I don't know. It's tough. I think I'm
those videos of Derrick Henry in practice where it's two coaches to the right and left of him with broomsticks, with helmets on either side, and he's just practicing his stiff arm like over and over again, throwing guys into the ground. Then you see him on game day, and there goes a cornerback flying through the air.